Welcome back to Competitive Pokémon Explained, where I explain certain aspects of Smogon, the unofficial singles format, and VGC, the official doubles format, that might not be so obvious to newer players and spectators. And wow, you guys seem to really like the last video. So much so that it is my most popular video in the history of this channel, which I am ecstatic about. But I'll get into that later on in the video. For today, I'm going to be explaining bans and clauses in Smogon and VGC. I will not be explaining why specific Pokemon are banned. If I did that, then this would be a ridiculously long video. Instead, I will be talking about the little text that appears at the start of every Pokemon Showdown battle on the right hand side. Why do they exist? Stick around to find out, but first, I have to make a little change. Oh, before I forget, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Apparently YouTube does this cute little thing where it highlights the subscribe button whenever I say subscribe for the first time in a video, so hey, if nothing else, why not go down there to check it out? With that out of the way, let's begin. Let's first start with an explanation on why these two things exist in the first place. Some viewers may question these clauses, as these sorts of limitations seem to inhibit creativity and are sort of a meta way to prevent people from having fun. Well, actually, they do the opposite, or at least are meant to do the opposite. Smogon and VGC ban certain things because it allows creative strategies to shine. If, say, for example, people were allowed to freely use overpowered legendaries in VGC, then every single battle would just be the same few Pokemon being used over and over again. And while that does happen on occasion, see Sun and Moon with Incineroar, for example, allowing legendaries to be used in every slot doesn't allow for the other 90% of Pokemon to shine. And that's the best part about competitive. Sure, there are a lot of meta picks, and generally speaking, the best Pokemon are the best for a reason, but there is a lot of merit to be had for using off-the-beat picks to win major tournaments. For example, Pachirisu was used in a VGC tournament a while back, and that was the most mind-blowing thing back in the day. Bans also exist to restrict uncompetitive strategies from being used. What do I mean by uncompetitive exactly? Well, to put it simply, strategies that are uncompetitive in nature are just unfair. They usually are very polarizing and are, to most people, unfun to fight against. Now, the competitive scene doesn't just ban stuff just because it's unfun. No one is out here banning Charizard because little Timmy cried on ladder saying how unfun it is. No, I'm more so talking about strategies that are just entirely too overpowered, over-centralizing, and too polarizing to be used. Big Yellow actually did a video on specific ban strategies across the generations, and I'll leave it in the description just in case you're curious after the video is done. Now that I've generally talked about why bans exist, let's talk about these clauses specifically. I will be talking about Smogon clauses across every generation, as well as VGC's unique clauses that are updated to the current generation, Scarlet and Violet. With that out of the way, let's start with this clause prevents the use of 2 or more Pokemon with the same national Pokédex number on a team. This includes different forms of the same Pokemon as well. This clause is used both in Smogon and VGC. This clause is put into place to prevent a trainer from spamming the same Pokemon over and over again. I see this as more of a gentle nudge in the right direction rather than a bad restriction. It encourages trainers to use more creativity in their team building and encourages more balanced teams. Some may also say that this clause eases prediction on the opponent, as if a trainer brought 2 of the same Pokemon with different sets, the opponent would have to guess which set you brought out. Essentially though, this clause exists to prevent over-centralization, like I mentioned earlier. If this clause was lifted, there might be a future where everyone just spams the same overpowered Pokemon with little room for counterplay. If you put an opponent's Pokemon to sleep, then you cannot put another of your opponent's Pokemon to sleep until that previous Pokemon wakes up. In Pokemon Showdown, this is automatically prevented through the use of a mod, but in the games, you automatically lose instead if you put another Pokemon to sleep. This is to prevent unfair scenarios where your opponent cannot do anything and you just sleep your entire team. If this clause were to be removed, there could be a future where sleep moves are the meta, and the entire battle is a race to see who puts the other's team to sleep first. It would be, again, over-centralizing, and that's not what we want. There also exists a more recent development for Generation 1 specifically, as Freeze Clause was added to Generation 1 formats. It's the same idea as Sleep Clause, but because Freeze is so much more prevalent in Generation 1, with Blizzard and Ice being used everywhere, and with Freeze essentially being a KO in those games, Smogon decided that the Freeze Clause for Generation 1 would be for the best. This clause prevents the use of OHKO moves like Guillotine and Sheer Cold. This is only used in many Smogon formats and is not present in VGC. Normal moves like Hydro Pump and Fire Blast can one-hit KO a Pokemon, so why are these specific moves the exception? Most of the skill of competitive Pokemon is damage calculations. Being able to decide what action to take based on predicted damage and general game knowledge is a lot of what differentiates good Pokemon trainers from great Pokemon trainers. With OHKO moves, that extra dimension of Pokemon battling is just flushed down the toilet. While they aren't the most consistent moves ever, they do guarantee a Pokemon will faint if they hit, with little counterplay on the opponent's end. No amount of bulk can prevent a one-hit KO move from fainting your Pokemon. Thankfully, no Pokemon with the ability No Guard, which makes every move hit, has the ability to learn OHKO moves. But if they did, then I can imagine a scenario where this clause didn't exist, and the only Pokemon that could even compete would be No Guard Pokemon with one-hit KO moves. This clause prevents the use of all evasion boosting moves, like Double Team. Missing Focus Blasts and Stone Edge can already be infuriating at times, and making every move like that for your opponent is just unfair. Plus, it is very much luck based, so skill is very de-emphasized, something that competitive play should be encouraging more of, not less. It also just prevents trolling strategies from being too viable, which is always a bonus. VGC actually doesn't have anything similar to this clause, as evasion isn't something that is abused often in the doubles format. While picks like Minimize Chansey and Sandville Garchomp were used at one point, they aren't as prevalent. Why then is this banned in singles when doubles it's not a big issue? Well, Smogon is a different entity from the Pokemon Company. They don't always come to the same conclusion about broken stuff. A minor point to add to that is that in doubles, you have twice as many chances to hit a Pokemon each turn, and generally VGC battles are quicker than Smogon battles, so you have less time to set up evasion. A Pokemon cannot have the ability Moody. Moody is an ability that randomly increases one stat by 2 stages and randomly decreases another stat by 1 stage at the end of each turn. Moody Pokemon can become insanely broken with just a little bit of luck and patience, and many Moody Pokemon have moves that allow you to stall for time, like Protect and Substitute, allowing for more boosts. This clause was put into place to prevent stupid strategies from spawning, and the ability itself is uncompetitive due to its random nature. It wasn't helped by the fact that before Generation 8, it had the ability to boost evasion, something that was already a big no-no in Smogon. Even with the removal of evasion boosting, it still was too random to ever be competitive. A player cannot cause an endless battle, or in other words, a battle that cannot be ended without forfeiting. The most famous example of this was the Slowbro that had the Lepa Berry, a PP restoring berry, with the moves Recycle, Heal Pulse, Slack Off, and Block. What this Slowbro did was prevent the opponent from switching out using Block, healing both the Slowbro and the opponent with Slack Off and Heal Pulse respectively, and recycling the Lepa Berry so that it can never run out of PP. The opponent wouldn't be able to do anything, as those Pokemon would heal any damage they take, and they couldn't switch out. As I'm sure you've guessed by now, this clause was put into place to prevent uncompetitive strategies from being used. Forcing an opponent to forfeit is not a good strategy in general, and is very unsportsmanlike and unfun. This clause exists in VGC as well, however the use of an overall game timer is used to discourage/prevent strategies like this from happening. This clause is something that I have never seen before, but upon further research, I agree with why this was implemented. This clause simply bans the use of Swagger, a move that increases the target's attack by 2 stages but confuses them. Similar to Moody and Evasion, Swagger forces a lot of situations where someone has to essentially roll the dice. If they get a bad roll, then sucks a suck. Again, no competitive environment should be entirely based around luck. Competitive games can and will have elements of luck, especially Pokemon. However, where many people draw the line is how dependent a strategy is on luck. If a strategy is entirely based around luck, then it has no place in competitive play. The key distinction between elements of luck and luck-based strategies is that skill is still the most important thing when there's a game with elements of luck. Luck-based strategies do not require a whole lot of skill, and therefore is uncompetitive by nature. This clause bans the use of abilities like Shadow Tag and Arena Trap, abilities that prevent the opponent's Pokemon from switching. Oftentimes, Magnet Pull isn't banned, despite the ability trapping the opponent's Steel-type Pokemon. What is the distinction here? This is where we get into a lot of gray area type of stuff, because trapping itself isn't banned, but specific trapping abilities are. Moves like Mean Look and Bind aren't banned, and they trap Pokemon. So it's not the blocking of switches itself that is banned, but then why are these abilities that block switches banned? Simply put, moves that block switches aren't very good. They're fine, blocking your opponent's switches is still removing a key part of their gameplay, but it's not the best. Shadow Tag and Arena Trap, though, are banned because it's too simple to trap the opponent's Pokemon. You switch in your Shadow Tag Pokemon, and bam! Your opponent can't just fight the guy with another guy that does better at fighting the guy. No, your opponent has to use the guy they already had to fight the guy. And this can lead to very disadvantageous situations for the opponent, often leading to a single KO at best and a loss at worst. These abilities are banned because it's too simple to remove an entire dimension of gameplay for your opponent, making it unfair and unbalanced. Magnet Tool isn't often banned for this reason because it provides specific roles for Pokemon and can provide a balancing factor for Steel-type Pokemon. The pool of available Steel-type Pokemon is always smaller than the pool of available Pokemon that are any other type, so it's less overpowered there. This is actually a VGC only clause, and it prevents the use of duplicate items from being used on your team. For example, 2 Pokemon on your team cannot have the Focus Sash item. Only one of those Pokemon are allowed with the Focus Sash. This clause was made so that trainers are encouraged to be creative with their sets and not spam the same items over and over again for every single Pokemon. Not much else to say here, it's pretty much the same reason why the species clause was implemented. This is another VGC only clause, and it's a unique one, preventing the use of event Pokemon. Though this is something that the most recent rules do not include. This was done so that competitors that didn't participate in real life events wouldn't miss out on a potentially really strong Pokemon just because they didn't do something IRL. With the prevalence of online events, this has become a less of an issue. But back in the days of yore, when GameStop and other places would host in-person events, this was a safety measure for people who couldn't make it to those events. Barring any generation exclusive clauses, that is all the bans and clauses for Smogon and VGC. Thank you guys so much for watching and supporting the channel recently. I really cannot thank you guys enough for all the support. To put it briefly, I have been making content for years and years, and I'm so glad that I have finally found my footing. Again, I really appreciate it. In other news, I left a poll recently in my community tab that asked you, yes you, the viewers, what this series should be named, so leave your suggestions on that poll. With that out of the way, if you made it this far, congratulations. Be sure to comment on the question of the day, or ask any questions that you have down below. I'd love to answer any questions you may have. Thank you all so much for watching, but that's all the time I have. So, see you in the next one.